Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I'm your host, Levi Stevenson, also the managing editor over at SB Nation's Wide Right Natty Light, the Iowa State site for the SB Nation Network. Happy to be back again this week to talk about Iowa State Cyclones and specifically the Big 12, because this week is Big 12 Media Days, which started today. Iowa State was on the docket for today, as well as a number of other teams. Then there's one more day tomorrow where we'll hear from everybody else. Couple interesting things that we heard today that I'll talk about a little bit. Unfortunately, Matt Campbell is kind of the undisputed king of coach speak and not really saying much of anything. Not much of anything new, anyways. In press conferences, doesn't typically drop a lot of interesting nuggets or give anything away too significantly. But the we did get a couple little things here and there too, and just had some interesting things to say. Brett Yormark talked about the potential playoff format a little bit. And then also another part of this week is that College Football 26 is now out. If you bought the early access, you've had it since yesterday. And if you just pre-ordered the regular version, you'll get it on Friday. I'll kind of give my thoughts on that as well. And then one thing I also want to talk about is that this week I'm going to put out a poll, I think, maybe a series of polls. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it. Basically what's going to do is I'm going to put together an all-time Iowa State roster that can be put into the team builder for College Football 26. So to create an all-time Iowa State team, which I think would be a lot of fun, that people would be able to play with it on the game and all that too. So we'll talk a little bit about all that. And I also got a couple of things I want to talk about the game as far as Iowa State goes too. So, but first, let's get into it with Big 12 Media Days, which started today. Iowa State went, Matt Campbell was one of the first ones up on the podium. And, when you get to these types of things, Matt Campbell does not typically drop a lot of earth-shattering information. It's a lot of, people saying like, well, you did this last season. What are you going to do this season? And then he says, well, we've got great people in our program. And I was been really impressed by the kids and their leadership and their drive to get back into the locker room and not be satisfied. Kind of all the typical talking points, I guess you could say. And just kind of, it's a lot of the same kind of hyperbole you get from coaches. It just, he does mean it. Like Matt Campbell is a very sincere guy that means everything he says. Everything that comes out of his mouth comes out with a purpose. But it still sounds like coach speak stuff that doesn't mean anything. So it's hard to pull a lot from these things. But one of the big things that was asked about, obviously the playoff structure is a big thing here, and Brett Yormark talked about that a little bit today. He talked about how he is currently advocating for the 5-11 format versus the 4-4-2-2 format for the playoff. I think, and I want to talk about this here a little because I've got some thoughts on it as well, but. We got Dukester's in here. Thank you. He's here. Loyal follower of the Dukester, and has jumped in. Appreciate you commenting and jumping in every week. Stephen Smith says, what are your thoughts on what Matt Campbell said about how the players stayed at Iowa State and how his quotes got misinterpreted on how he retained his players? Okay, this is kind of the point I wanted to get to talking about. First, I want to show kind of a clip of what's being referenced here. So Matt Campbell put together he had a clip here. Hold on. Let me make sure I can get you this here. Just getting the audio real quick. Okay. You guys should have audio of this. If not, let me know.
To have in-house, without it being as Wild West as it has been, do you like that? I know it's still crazy and nobody really knows what day-to-day brings, but do you think we're heading in the right direction just as an industry?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell. I think until you figure out, is this really the number? Are there ways around the number? There will be. What are those? Is it limit, probably disparity that we have right now. I think we live in a world in college football that looks like Major League Baseball, in a lot of ways. And so, it's really too early to tell, Chris, on that. I hope that we're there, but I think, again, you're hoping because I don't think you have any clarity if this is really what's going on. I think the positive when I look at our own team is, we were able to retain our football team. I think it says a lot about Iowa State football. I think if you looked at the top 20 guys in our program, probably could have made a heck of a lot more money at a lot of other places, and we were able to keep our kids home, and I think that was huge.
So what he's saying there, I hope everybody got the audio from that. I think you should have. So what he's saying there is, not anything revelatory necessarily, that that Iowa State was able to hang on to, pretty much, all of its most important guys, Dominic Orange, Jeremiah Cooper, everybody. And it was it's a pretty big kind of recruiting coup, because right now, the big part about recruiting is not just getting guys from high school and getting guys from the transfer portal, but it's also re-recruiting your own players. Essentially, player retention is kind of the new recruiting almost. So the problem where this got mixed up a little bit here is Pete Thamel, who does a very good job for I believe it's Yahoo. Oh, he's with ESPN. I think he used to be with Yahoo. I don't know. Anyways, Pete Thamel with ESPN tweeted out and said, well, here's a great synopsis of what's happening. So Pete Thamel tweeted out, Iowa State coach Matt Campbell, our top 20 guys took a pay cut to come back to Iowa State. He also mentioned coaching staff continuity is a big factor. And then obviously a bunch of people in the comments teed off saying, hey, all of the, Iowa State's poor. They can't pay people. So yeah, making AI photos and stuff like that. Also, side note, don't use AI to make photos. It's garbage. It's bad for the planet. You're also harming artists that it's stealing from. Anyways, not to go on a little diatribe here, but AI art sucks. Don't use it. But anyways, so Pete Thamel tweets out that Matt Campbell says that Iowa State top 20 guys took a pay cut. That is not what he said. That is not at all what he said. There is nobody at Iowa State that had their NIL checks slashed to make room for other people. That is not what happened. What Matt Campbell said was that a bunch of guys had an opportunity to leave and go get bigger offers to go get make more money at other programs, and they turn them down. And this type of thing, like I said, Pete Thamel does a very good job. And so I'm not trying to get on him or anything like that. But this is kind of a problematic tweet. It's a little bit of a problematic wording on this tweet, because it suggests that Iowa State is too poor to be able to pay players their NIL money and all that or whatever, which isn't true. Is Iowa State going to be able to shell out as much money as Ohio State or Georgia or whatever for whatever they're trying to do? No, that's okay. Iowa State is, however, meeting the full $20.5 million revenue share. So they're meeting the full, salary cap, if you want to call it that, for college athletes. They are doing that. So it's not as though Iowa State isn't doing its best to financially compete here and being fine, and doing fine with it. But, like I said, so Deuce just said, media twisting words as usual. It's I hesitate to go that far, because I really don't think that, Pete Thamel was trying to be malicious about it or anything like that. But it is an unfortunately worded tweet, because, like I said, this if this was 100% true and Jeremiah Cooper's paycheck got cut by 50%, and just to make, which would be, a selfless act on his part, but that's not what happened. That's not what happened. Those guys are still making the money. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they did. Maybe they voluntarily, took a pay cut or whatever just to do that. But that's not at all what Matt Campbell is implying here or anything. He said that they could have gotten more money other places and they chose not to. That is not the same thing as taking a pay cut. And it means something completely different. So this type of stuff needs to stop. I understand what he was trying to do. He's trying to, summarize and characterize what Matt Campbell said to, try to give the best summation of what he said. But unfortunately, saying someone chose not to take a pay raise is not the same thing at all as them taking a pay cut, as though it were like some involuntary thing. Because if Iowa State came up and immediately said, "Hey, by the way, we're cutting all of your NIL in half to make room for other people," they would have left. Everybody, like all those people would have left. That's it. They would have left. Like nobody takes a pay cut at a job and just stays there unless they have like literally no other choice. I mean, there's obviously some circumstances that would keep somebody at a job, even if they took a pay cut, because that's maybe just what's available to them or whatever. There's a million different reasons. But for the most part, if someone isn't like really tied to a job, if a job asks them to take a pay cut, they're not going to stay. And especially in college football where everybody's so mobile and high end, like I would say it's got players that are desired by other programs. So like if Jeremiah Cooper or Rocco Becht or Carson Hansen or whoever, had to take a pay cut and really didn't like that enough to transfer, they could find a roster spot next week. Like even maybe by the end of the week, they would have a roster spot on another team. Like and this just needs to stop, because then you got all these people tweeting out like, "Oh, I would say it's poor," like all this. It's just dumb. It's dumb. This was they said this was a mistake by Pete Thamel for mischaracterizing what Matt Campbell said. It's just not true. It is what it is. I mean, there's I don't think it's like going to affect the season at all, but it's unfortunate that made it on there, because then it affects the narrative around the team and all this, and just kind of affects the vibe a little bit from the outside looking in, stuff like that. Because the Big 12 already has enough of an issue of a problem with like the SEC and the Big 10, basically like discounting it, discounting it as not a real conference or not a conference worth your time or whatever. And when you have it with like one of the better teams in the conference, one that was just in the conference title game last year and has aspirations of winning the conference this year, if they're like supposedly, too poor to pay NIL stuff or whatever, that is just like, I mean, then it just looks bad on the league or whatever. And it's dumb. Like it shouldn't, like, that's not how it should be. I mean, it is what it is. Just kind of angered me a little bit. But what I do want to talk about a little bit more though, was Brett Yormark publicly endorsing the 5-11 model. And for the playoff, because obviously there's been that in the 4-4-2-2 model and all that it proposed. Steven Smith says, I think Brett Yormark is getting the conference in the right direction. We just need to focus on making sure everyone is on the same path. I think for the most part, Brett Yormark has done a pretty good job. It seems like the schools are aligned. I think initially Utah was not aligned with the rest of the conference, and they were here literally just because they had to be in a power conference. But after getting their butt whooped in basically every sport last year, I think they are more in line and understanding that they should be here and should be thankful for the opportunity that was given to them to be in this conference. But so Brett Yormark publicly endorsed the 5-11 model, which is just the conference champions get an auto bid, and then the rest of it is at larges. And he said that he expects the ACC commissioner to make the same thing as well. So the question is what direction should they go with this? I have been on Mark Rogers' show a couple times. I was just on there last week and today. We were talking about a little bit. I am a full endorser of the 5-11 model as it currently stands. So the 4-4-2 model is 4 auto bids for the Big 10, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, and then at larges from there. There's a couple issues I see here. So let's talk pros and cons here. The obvious pro of the 4-4-2-2 for the Big 12 is that you have 2 guaranteed bids every year. So almost always your champion and runner-up and your other conference championship contender, your other conference championship participant are both going to be in the playoff every year. That's good. Guarantees you're always there. Guarantees you have multiple representatives. However, I see downsides here. One, that model essentially guarantees that you are never going to see a third team in the playoff. Never, 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 never. Because it leaves no room. Because you got to remember that any of these models, the 511 or the 4422, basically should also have another one stapled onto it for Notre Dame. Notre Dame, if they are 9 wins or better, even maybe 10 wins or 10 wins or better for sure. Maybe 9 wins or better. Probably if Notre Dame has 10 wins, they are in the playoff. Period. That's just how it's gonna work. The 4422 model has more playoff spots, like quite a few more spots locked up. And if you have Notre Dame shoved in there, the last, the few remaining spots are gonna just be SEC Big Ten teams. That's it. That's all they're gonna be, and that's all we're gonna have. The 511 model does not make necessarily the chances of the Big 12 having a third team any better. Not any. It doesn't make it worse. It maybe makes it like a touch better because technically if the SEC beat each other up, if the SEC or the Big Ten had too many teams sitting at 9 wins and they just beat each other up a bunch, would they get all 4 teams? Would they get 4 teams in or just 3 type of thing? And would that extra spot then go to the ACC or the Big 12? Depends on what's going on in that year. But more importantly, if you go to the 4-4-2-2 model, you as a conference, as the Big 12 and the ACC, are putting it on paper that you believe you are half as valuable as a conference as the SEC and the Big 10. Putting it in paper, in writing, that you as a conference believe that. Not that the SEC or the Big 10 believes that, not that the ESPN believes that, but that you, the conference, believes that you are half as good as the other two conferences. I see that as a big loss for a conference that has been fighting for its life for the last 15 years and just trying to keep everything afloat, despite ESPN and Texas and Oklahoma trying to shoot it out of the water about 15 different times. And I don't think you can go forward and be taken seriously as a conference if you just up front admit that you're just not as valuable as the SEC in the Big Ten. And sure, are the TV contracts equal? No. The TV, the SEC and the Big Ten obviously have more lucrative TV deals. No question about it. However, there's a difference between ESPN deciding what they were worth to you, what you guys are, all the conferences are worth to them, and you as a conference deciding that you are worth less than the other conferences yourself. I think that causes. I think it's bad for the direction of the conference as far as keeping the conference together, as far as keeping confidence that the conference is on a path moving forward. To me, that feels like you are artificially propping up 2 teams. You're artificially propping up 2 teams into the playoff, but then you're also, they're not, the second one's not going to be taken seriously because they're just the extra playoff team. The Big 12 only got 2 in because, they only got 2 in because that's just what they're supposed to get. And now they're not taken seriously or whatever it is. And then if they lose in the first round, then it's like, well, they should have never been there. The Big 12 is an unserious conference. They shouldn't be paid attention to and all this. And all of it goes downhill for the Big 12 from there. But at least with the 511 model, there's enough teams, the top 16 teams, that the Big 12 should be able to get 2 teams in there most years. I believe they should. And like if last year's 12-team playoff was instead 16 teams, the Big 12 would have gotten a second team in. They would have. I think most years you're still going to give yourself 2 teams. But you don't have to put it in writing that you believe you are worth less than the other conferences. I think that's an important distinction to make, even if it results in you getting the same number of playoff teams. If you want to have leverage in any future agreements, any bargaining for maybe a new league that splits off, and you want to figure out how to distribute everything, whatever it is. If you say, hey, our conference is less than the other 2, it is less meaningful, it is less valuable, It is, and you admit that as a school, it will be used as leverage against you. Anything you can, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion. And the Big 12 agrees to it. You're just saying, yes, please, just I'll take whatever I want. You become a beggar. And I don't want that to be the Big 12. I don't want that to be the conference that Iowa State is in, is the conference that is just choosing to be a beggar, or I don't like that. Steven Smith says, what are your thoughts on the Big 12 not doing any preseason poll for the season? I'm on the record. I believe preseason polls are deeply stupid. I don't think that they are worth anybody's time. I don't think they're worth paying attention to, because nobody has any idea what the hell's going on. The transfer portal has created so much roster turnover all across the country that you don't really know what these teams are look like until about October. Because the problem here is that the Big 12's issue here too is that because the league is so there's so much parity in the league, and it's so hard to predict. The more often that you have the last place team do really well, the team that was picked last do really well. Unfortunately, if this was the SEC or the Big Ten and they picked Purdue to finish last, and then Purdue ended up being a playoff team, that would speak to the strength of the SEC and the Big Ten, that that even their last place team is, a playoff team. However, for the Big 12, that is unfortunately not how things get spun. 2 years ago, West Virginia was picked last in the conference, finished 9-3. Last year, Arizona State was picked last, won the Big 12. And that's not to take away from what Arizona State did. They did, that was awesome. They had an unbelievable season. I would assume probably the best season in school history. And unfortunately, it didn't look awesome for the Big 12, because now it's like, well, if your last place team won the league, the team this team is bad, but they still won the league, that means your league is bad. For the Big 12, I think it makes complete sense to get rid of preseason polls, because you can't control what the narrative is that comes from national pundits for the playoff committee or whatever it is. And the more often that the media is completely wrong on these teams, unfortunately does not tell everybody that this conference is wide open and super fun and everyone should watch it. It means that the league is weak and not capable of producing champions. And that sucks, because it's not true. He says, so to be the case with the Big 12, you could have 3 teams with better records, 11-1 or 10-2, but a 9-3 team could get in simply because they're the SEC. I mean, I think that could happen. If it's an 11-1 Big 12 team and a 9-3 SEC team, I think they would probably give it to the Big 12 team. The important part here to remember too is that for the most part in the 12-team playoff era, and maybe even the 4-team era, the playoff committee has largely gotten it right. They haven't really, there was in the 4-team era, there was always a 5th team. There was, in the 12-team era, there's always a 13th team. So someone's going to feel like they got snubbed. But for the most part, the committee has gotten it right, pretty much right or all right most years. And so in the end, if a Big 12 team is deserving of getting to the playoff, I do have some faith in the committee to put the deserving team in over a 9-3 SEC team just on the basis of they draw eyeballs. I think they would do that. I think they would use their better judgment. I can't guarantee that they would, but I have some faith that they would. But it's hard to say. But either way, if you're the Big 12, I don't think you can in good conscience go into accepting the 4-4-2 model and then just publicly admit that you don't think your conference is worthy of the same recognition as the Big 10 and the SEC, or that it's worthy of basically almost that it's even worthy of playing for the same championship. And I think that's a huge issue. So if anybody's got any of their comments from me about media days, definitely throw them in the chat right now. But the other thing I want to talk about, we won't go probably over an hour today. We might be even just to touch on it an hour today. But the other thing, the other interesting thing this week, actually, before we move on to the next thing, one thing I do want to talk about, we showed that clip before, the player retention. But I do want to touch on this a little bit, because it's not just I want to talk about the why Matt Campbell is able to hang on. I want about the why they're to be able to hang on to these players that other programs are trying to buy away from the team, essentially. I mean, we heard when, Ohio State and Tennessee both this past offseason, when both of them apparently went pretty hard after Rocco Becht, offered him a pretty significant chunk of change, which obviously Rocco has turned down. Jeremiah Cooper, Dominic Orange, Brennan Black, lots of these guys that have gotten lots and lots of offers to go other places, but have chosen to stay. And I think this is kind of by design for Matt Campbell. Now, I mean, we've heard for years and years and years that he is a player's coach, that people love playing for him because he, not only treats them like, coach, but treats them like they're his own kids, basically. Takes care of them on and off the field, things like that, helps you become, an adult, a functioning adult in society. And I think the staff also intentionally recruits the type of person that just loves playing football. He even said it today in the press conference. He is like, there's not a lot to do in Ames, but that's okay. Cause that means that the people that want to come here are the people that really love football, and want to, and that is what they're here for. They're not here for the money. They're not here for publicity or whatever it is. They're here because they love the sport of football. And I think you can see that when Matt Campbell's teams play, you can just see them playing with heart. And you can see that in how they've been able to retain this roster. I could be correct. I could be wrong here, but I believe the last starter that transferred away from Matt Campbell was Isheem Young, and after the 2020 season when he went to Ole Miss. I believe that is the last starter that transferred, because Craig McDonald was before that, but I believe Isheem Young was the last starter to transfer, which I think is incredible, unbelievable, to do that in today's day and age. It's the type of person that if they get offered double what they are, they're staying here because they've got something to build. They want to play for Matt Campbell. And I think that's absolutely the right strategy to take here, because Iowa State's not going to be able to buy a $20 million roster like Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and whoever else, or Texas Tech now, apparently, or BYU. They're not able to get that kind of funding for these guys, but they can pay enough to keep guys happy, and can now, they're putting themselves in a place to compete and to keep the players that they recruit. So, the Dukester is bringing up the new helmet. So this was actually announced a couple weeks ago, but we kind of really got a good, got a lot more publicity around it, I guess, this week. So Iowa State has a new red helmet. Now, let's see if I can pull it up here, see if I can find a good picture of it. Yeah, here we go. So this is the new red helmet. This is fantastic. This is my favorite. This is my favorite helmet that Iowa State's ever worn, or will ever wear. Or sorry, will have worn, I should say. Beautiful. The move back to the white face mask, I think, is a big win. I've always been a fan of when we have, mismatching color of the helmet and face masks. We haven't worn white face masks with truly white face masks since the McCarney era, I believe, like 2007, somewhere in there. Under Matt Campbell, the red helmets always had red face masks and black chin straps. Now they're doing white face mask, white chin strap, and with that beautiful script logo, which debuted last season. And it kind of seems like they're moving to this almost as almost the primary word mark or the logo for the football program. And actually they put it on a basketball uniform last year too. It seems like they're ready to go back to the heavy use of this script, which I think is a massive win. I'm not as much of a hater of the block I-State logo as a lot of people are. And there's a lot of people that really don't like that or think it's boring. It's not super exciting. I don't think it's I don't think it's the worst logo ever made. It's just kind of boring. Um, it is like it has now gained notoriety, or like as that's Iowa State's logo. So it's not like it. When it was first made, people were like, oh, is it Indiana State? Is it Illinois State? Is it Idaho State? Whatever. Like, one, nobody was actually like confused about that, but two, um, this is it's gained enough brand recognition where people recognize that as the Iowa State logo. But this script logo is just fabulous. It's just great. That's all there is to it. It's a fabulous helmet. They're gonna wear it with the red. I want to say they also, yeah, you can see, there you go. There's the more dressed up look with it with the home reds. Gosh, that looks great. Really just amazing thing here. So the next thing I want to talk about here, though, is College Football 26, which just came out. Dukester's number one hate of our logo. Fair enough. College Football 26 just came out, and I've gotten to play a few games with it, and I wanted to touch on a couple of things. The first thing, so these are player ratings here. We'll talk about those in a second. The first thing that annoys me a little bit, Matt Campbell is wearing a red hat and red shirt in the game. I know it seems like a small detail, but Matt Campbell has worn black hat, black shirt in every game since 2018, I think, when they debuted the black uniforms. He did wear red before that, before we had the black uniforms, but Matt Campbell wears black. He does not wear red. However, I do want to say, though, overall, the game seems pretty fun right now. The menu music is different. It's not just one rotating drum line all the time. The Dynasty mode seems like it's gotten a lot of improvements. The gameplay feels very nice. I do want to talk about here, though, about Iowa State's ratings. Now that we've got a little bit more of a clear idea of what these look like on the game. We did look at the top 10 a little bit last week and got a good idea what those are. A couple of guys in here, though, I wanted to talk about. So there's a few that were left kind of right off, just off the list, off of the top 10 list. So there's Chase Soul down there. He was the bottom of the top 10, I believe. Ben Bramer's right there. Gabe Burkle is right there below Ben Bramer. So, I mean, that's a nice spot for him, because I think he played really nicely at the end of towards the end of the last season. I thought he was really, really good. Trevor Burr is an interesting one up here at 80 overall. He played a bunch last season, but I don't think most people remember him as being the starter, because Dylan Barrett was there at left guard for a while and then he got hurt. But Trevor Burr was really good, and I think there's an expectation that it's either going to be him or Jim Boniface at the right guard position going into this season. I think it'll be James Neal at left tackle, Dylan Barrett at left guard, Brennan Black at center, and then either Trevor Burr or Jim Boniface at right guard, and then Tyler Miller at right tackle. So nice thing there. And Xavier Townsend just off the, he's still in the 80s, kind of like we thought. Victor says Coach Campbell wasn't happy I was skipping meetings with the girl on Road to Glory. Oh gosh. Probably not. Yeah. But there's Xavier Townsend, sitting at 80 overall, 92 speed. I kind of thought he would be a little bit higher than that, but there's not very many players in this game that are like over 93 or 94. There are a couple that are high, but mostly they're just sitting down in the low 90s. But Xavier Townsend, excuse me, super athletic. He's right there. Daniel Jackson is the guy here. He was hurt. He's been hurt, his whole career. And if he can stay healthy, I think he's one of the candidates to be up there. I think it'll be the starting receivers will be Chase Soul and Xavier Townsend, but it wouldn't surprise me if Daniel Jackson gets quite a bit of run here. Trey Bell there at a 79. Jim Boniface is he's the other option at right guard. Notably, it says center here because he was technically listed as a center, but he'll be a right guard this year. And also, I wanted to see so Trevor Burr is actually the highest. Oh no, there's Tyler Miller and Dylan Barrett up there, but Trevor Burr is actually the third highest rated offensive lineman. One thing yeah, okay. So Then we've got Trey Bell, the transfer corner there at 79. James Neal at 78 there. Eli Green at 78. He didn't play a lot. We thought we saw something earlier, early in the season with against North Dakota. He had a nice game, and we were like, "Wow, this is your guy right here." It was just a second Jalen Knoll, and then he just never really played the rest of the year. Not sure what's going on there. Will McLaughlin came. He was injured for a lot of last year, but I think this is a guy that'll rise probably into the 80s. Cooper Ebel, I was pretty surprised to see him down here all the way to 77. I kind of was expecting him to be more up in right around 80, but Brendan Black, another guy I would have thought he would have been higher, maybe around an 80. Jameson Patton is going to be a new starter there, probably at strong safety or free safety. And really excited about him. He's played tons of snaps at Iowa State. Dylan Lee is probably the third string running back now, kind of down here in the 70s. Akini Ziogu, Tyler Perkins, Tayshaun James, Drew Clausen at tight end. Kind of a weird one there. Tyler Moore, he's going to be more of an H-back. Benny Nagoya there. Benny Nagoya actually got a name check from Campbell today at media days as a guy to kind of keep an eye out for. Now we know he switched to corner. I think he's an interesting guy there. Trey Bell will probably start across from Jontez Williams, but I would not be surprised to see Benny Nagoya come in as a nickel or something like that, or get some run as a backup corner. He played corner in high school. And we've already seen what they did with Darian Porter. If they can do that with Benny Nagoya, great. We're in good shape. Dukester says Caleb Bacon plays way above his overall. In my couple games that I've played with him, Caleb Bacon does play way above his overall. Also, Dominic Orange in the game is dominant. He's an outrageously good defensive player on the game. Caleb Brazina, Kyle Conradi, Vontroy Malone down here in the 75 range. Vontroy Malone is one of the transfers in at the defensive end spot. Miles Mendezune. River Peppers is another guy that got name checked today by Matt Campbell at Big 12 Media Days. If you've been watching this show or listening to any podcasts that I've done, you already know that I'm a big fan of River Peppers and think he's going to be awesome because I watched his tape and he's a really exciting football player. In fact, I'm going to pull up his tape here in this because I just really like watching it. But overall, there's a few guys here I think are definitely going to be risers throughout the season. I think Rocco Beck will end up in the 90s. I think Chase Sowell will end up at least in the high 80s. Xavier Townsend probably mid 80s. Really interesting here. Overall, game's fun. Over on the Wide Right 90 Like Discord, we are actually running a dynasty, and I think we've got 10 teams in it right now. We're all running in G5. It's been totally realigned to make geographically minded conferences. There's all 5 Power 5 conferences, rebuilt the Pac-12 that have 12 teams exactly, and then everybody else is in a G5 conference, and we've got we've got a promotion relegation system. So each G5 conference has a paired Power 5 conference. It has a Power 5 conference that's paired up with it. Let me pull it up here. Actually, I can show you what's going on. I'm really excited to do this because it took me a while to get this kind of like organized on how I wanted to do it. But let's see here. So basically, in the top tier, you got there. So the ACC is Clemson, Duke, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Miami, NC State, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, West Virginia. The Big 12 is a lot different. I kind of remade it back to the old Big 12, which is Baylor, Houston. I did leave Houston. Iowa State, Kansas State, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas A&M. The Big 10, a little bit different because those Pac-12 schools are back in the Pac-12, but also you will notice I have Notre Dame in a conference. Notre Dame is in the Big 10 now. And then the SEC, Florida State is now in the SEC. But otherwise, it's most of your kind of traditional SEC schools. Pac-12 is Arizona State, Boise State, BYU, Colorado, Oregon State, UCLA, USC, Utah, Washington, and Washington State. But now, here's how it works. So the ACC is paired up with the American Conference. The Big 12 is Conference USA, Big 10 with the MAC, SEC with the Sun Belt, Pac-12 with the Mountain West. And these are also geographically minded. So you can see the geographic footprints of these Power 5 conferences. The American is kind of the East and Northeast. So it goes from East Carolina all the way up to Boston College. Covers that entire area. Conference USA is basically Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas, and Tulsa. So it's those 4 states, which are basically the southern part of the Big 12 footprint. MAC is just Big 10 country, basically. And then, so Texas Tech. Oh, did I leave them out? I think they're in the Big 12. Let me see here. I just did the conference realignment yesterday, and I'm pretty sure you're right. I did leave them out of this spreadsheet, but they are in the Big 12 in the conference, and I believe I moved something else around. But anyways, this is. I think I put. Here's what I did: is I put Texas Tech in the conference, and I moved Houston down to Conference USA. That's what I did. I made a small adjustment because I realized that Texas Tech was not on this list. And then we've got the Sun Belt, which is basically a little bit of Florida. Actually, it's Florida, Florida, the Carolinas, and kind of there's Appalachian State there it's Florida and the Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas essentially. Then the Mountain West is just everything west of the Mississippi essentially, or west of the Missouri, south of the Missouri. And then basically the top 2 teams from the bottom conference go up into the power conference, and then the bottom 2 teams in the power conference drop down to there. So if after this season, Air Force and Hawaii win are the top 2 teams in the Mountain West, they will go up to the Pac-12, and let's say BYU and Washington State are the bottom 2, they will drop down to the Mountain West from the Pac-12. So it's a fun league. These are all the teams that are taken. I'm playing Georgia State. We've got a few of these other ones, basically starting out low and then working our way up. We're not going to be changing teams. You're going to stick with your own team and then just move up a tier. So that way you don't have to worry about jumping jobs, because you can just move up to the better conference, then have all the benefits that go with it. So fun little dynasty we're running over there. I might keep some updates throughout the season. I also I'm thinking during the season, I'm going to do game simulations essentially from College Football 26 of the single game matchup. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do that yet. Especially because the first week is in Ireland, and I'm going to be in Ireland that first week. So I may have to pre-record that one. That's no big deal. Yeah, so that's what we got going on there. Pretty fun little deal. And then I will be putting together this week and weekend, I will be putting together an all-time Iowa State Cyclones team. I'll just put it in a spreadsheet and we'll go through it next week. And then I will make that team to be available for download on College Football 26. So should be pretty fun. I think we'll probably wrap it up for this week. Appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody commenting. I really appreciate all the comments. Keeping the discussion going. I really appreciate that. And we will be back again next week. We'll look over the Iowa State all-time team. We'll see if there's any recruiting news, if we get any commitment out of, I don't know, Evan Jacobson, and see if there's anything more coming out of media days. But we are just a little over a month away. I will be heading to Ireland. My plane leaves on the 16th, so I am 5 weeks away from hopping on a plane headed to Ireland, which I'm very excited for. So we'll see you guys all again next week, and enjoy the rest of your week. Go Cyclones.